Hello, beautiful humans. Welcome back to another episode of Naked Sunday. And I'm your host, Caleb Nelson. And I have the lovely Lori with me today on the podcast from across the pond. I was across the pond last week or whatever, last week from when I was recording this as a guest with all my friends out on the other side of the Atlantic. And I am excited to have you come and hanging out with me today. So thank you for being a guest with me today.
That's very, very kind of you. Thank you. A lovely welcome. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, if you've listened to any of my podcast episodes, you will know that I like to start with my episodes with why I appreciate my guest. Far be it for me to say, I think we as a humanity need to start telling each other why we love each other more. Call me crazy, but I think that's a good step in the whole direction of maybe a whole thing called world peace. So with that, I really value people who can hold space. I think there is a deep, kind wisdom behind that. I think that there is a humility and just a generosity of spirit that comes from that. And having now been a guest on your podcast, and we've had several other chats beforehand, but you have this very curious, kind, loving demeanor about you, which makes it very easy to just be with you, be in the moment, to just let my thoughts flow, to be authentic, to be real. I think that's a real gift in this day and age where I think a lot of people worry about just simply being themselves. And you do an incredible job of making people feel very safe to just be themselves. So I wanted to say thank you for being you.
Wow, I'm quite speechless. What a wonderful thing to say. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I mean, I'm glad that, that's what you feel. And that makes me feel very warm and even more looking forward to our conversation today.
Well, glad I could put a smile on your face and make you feel loved today because it's just the damn truth. That's what it is. So,
And obviously, I wanted you on my podcast. I know this is starting to feel a little bit like a love-in now, but
well,
I
hey,
wanted you on my podcast because you have this genuine kind of flow about how your thoughts come, and there's no inhibition. It just comes out, and it's very relatable, and it's very real, and it's very, I don't like the word authentic, but it kind of is, you know. And I just felt that there was a lot that people could get, not just from your words, but about how you expressed yourself. There is kind of a level of, I think I've got a few things sorted in my life and I'm feeling quite settled. And that really comes through in the way that you speak. So anybody who hasn't listened to you on my podcast, I see I'm gate crashing now completely, and you haven't even asked me a question yet. Um, they can, they can listen to you on my podcast as well. Right, I'm going to be quiet now.
God, I love you. You're so sweet. You got me blushing already. This is, I always make the joke, not just of my fake and baked tanning. It's a real blushing right now. The blood got my ego primed a little bit too, feeling good about myself. Maybe ask my wife if she thinks I have everything sorted out. She'll quickly put a pin right back in that balloon for me.
Well, I was very careful about not saying everything. I said quite a few things because, it's always a journey, isn't it, for us all,
It, it
which
is
I'm sure we might get into, but yeah, anyway.
it is certainly a journey, and I'm definitely a believer. You got to have the right people around you to keep you from getting too ahead of ourselves. Because I've learned the second I think I know everything is life, universe. It has a way of just sharply reminding you you got some more stuff to learn, and if anything, I think the more I continue to be humbled, the more I continue to realize how much I don't know. And
Well, exactly. And also, as you go through life, you have different stages in your life and you have different situations that you have to respond to. So even if you knew most of what you needed to know at the time that you needed to know it, you get to a new time where you need to know more stuff that you realize that you don't know.
how perplexing.
Whether that was
How,
a particularly conclusive statement or not. But anyway, we'll just go with it. We'll just fudge over it.
yeah, you crack me. I just love you. Before we get too far off into our tangents today, because I enjoy them, You know yourself better than I. Please share with the audience, Lori, who are you?
Who am I? Well, yes, I'm Laurie. I'm Laurie Weber. I'm English. I'm British, but I feel very English. I probably sound very English because I come from, the south of England where there is a regional accent, so I'm quite English. Um, I am in my 60s. I am in a wonderful stage of my life where a couple of other careers are kind of coming to a close. So I had a performance and a teaching career, and then I had a corporate training career. But in terms of my active involvement in particularly the corporate one, that's now pushed to the side. I still performed, but I'm now in a great phase in my life where I have created a business which came out of personal experience and out of solving quite a chronic problem. And that was one around food and eating and my relationship with food, which had been the narrative for a very long time. And I managed to resolve it. And after I had done that, something called COVID-19 happened, which for many of us was, of course, an horrendous world situation. There was one little positive for me, and that was that my corporate career, my training and coaching career, my job just stopped overnight. And having resolved my eating issue, I wondered whether I could transfer my coaching and development skills into helping people who may have similar issues. And so out of that was born the Mindful Eating Clinic. And here I am 5 years later, spending most of my working time in that business, but not working full time because I love to be outside. I'm very lucky to live in beautiful countryside in England, green rolling hills. I mean, just picture England and it's pretty, postcard like really in that way. And so that element of really wanting to help people and connect and change the life that somebody has with food, I'm now in a very fortunate position that at this time in my life I can do that and treat it almost vocationally. I mean, I do it professionally, but I'm able to consider it with more of a vocational slant because of where I am in my life and, the fact that I've worked for quite a long time. So all of those things put together, that's who I am now. That's where I am now. I love being around people. I'm a mad, crazy extrovert most of the time. I love performing. I love socializing. I love creating situations and environments for people to, flourish, be that at home or through my coaching, and talk to them about visual things and metaphor and trying to get them to think about things differently. That is just incredible. And it just feels very comfortable in a place where I'm very much at home. And I'm very lucky that I'm able to do that for a large part of my life.
You're just so cool. I, I had a couple
That's a
things.
very long-winded answer.
Oh, something I've noticed a little bit with my friends from across the pond? Y'all are so very apologetic for just being. Y'all got to stop this. Just be yourself, and I love it. You don't have anything to pop, or you were quite lovely. That was quite a lovely response, and it brought a lot of things to mind that I know definitely the demographic that listens to this podcast will definitely resonate. I want to first start. If you're cool with it, I'd love to hear your story about where you were with your relationship with food. And I say this because thought that came to mind is I don't think enough people realize how core of a relationship they have with food, and they keep it very closeted their entire life, not even seeing how it, in many ways, actually affects every element of their life. So I'd love to hear, like, how did that start? Where did this go? Because it's so amazing that if that was such a problem for you, such a pain point for you, for now to you be helping other people with that, I just think that's such a powerful thing. Yeah, I'd love to tell me about that really.
Yeah, sure, sure. Well, it happened when I was a teenager. It sort of started. Um, and I think I became very body conscious. I mean, looking back on it, I wasn't a large girl at all, but I wasn't a skinny girl. Um, and I had a lot of friends who were very sporty. They were on the hockey team and the netball team, and they were running around the track. And I wasn't. So I was born with a hip issue, so I was never very sporty. I mean, I could barely run for a bus. It just didn't really work properly. Um, but I found my niche through performance. So I started singing and acting very, very young, and that was my little thing. But I think I was quite body conscious. And I think that in a similar way to a lot of young women, but not exclusively women, boys as well, um, I started thinking that I probably needed to lose weight. So I started looking into dieting. So we're talking about the late 70s here, the late 70s, early 80s. So things like that might be people that can remember, but things like the F plan, and Weight Watchers was around then. And what that started to create was a cycle of disordered eating, which was dieting restriction followed by an inability to sustain that restriction, and then overeating, particularly on the foods that I had, or a diet book plan had told me I mustn't eat. So quite a classic, no refined carbs, or actually in those days, it was all about fat. It wasn't so much about sugar, it was all about fat. And in the early 80s, the low fat products started to come out. So all the, chemically produced, anyone who's read Ultra Processed People, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Amazing book. And so that started a cycle of dieting and overeating. And as it continued, so probably over the next few years, because I had exams and university and other pressures and things, it developed into quite severe restriction, and then, of course, quite severe or extreme eating. And that developed, I now know, I didn't know at the time, into binge eating disorder. And so, and that actually continued as a narrative on and off throughout my whole life for 40 years. 40. I started when I was 16. I solved it when I was 56. And it was a pattern that seemed to have its own fuel, because if I overate, I would feel incredibly guilty and shameful. But because food was providing some soothing and some comfort for me, it meant that when I felt really bad about myself, it was then food that I turned to, which then made it worse in my mind. And then because I had perhaps had, and I'm not talking days, I'm talking a week maybe, of binging all the time, thinking about food all the time, thinking about the next thing that you're going to eat when you're eating the previous thing. I would just get to a point where I just didn't have the energy to eat anymore. I kind of almost burnt myself out of the eating. So then I would start, and it would usually be Monday morning. It would be a new notebook. I'd start a new diet. And depending on how bad the binging had been, the dieting would be even more severe because I had to absolutely nail it. And the only way to stop it was just to be really strict with myself and really severe and really punitive. That was the only way. And so there was this up, down, on, off the entire time. And I got to a point, probably in my 20s, I had no idea what normal eating was like anymore. I'd lost any sense of eating intuitively, about being hungry or full, and I was counting calories in those days with a book. And then of course as the apps came about, whoa, my Fitness Pal was my conscience and used to beat me up because I'd gone over 5 calories or, and I would cheat my Fitness Pal. I mean, just absolute obsession and fear of food. So not touching food like cakes and biscuits because I thought, oh, I can't possibly have one because I can't stop eating them. So there was a lot of limiting belief, negative thinking. But people sort of hear that now, friends that I've known for quite a long time, and I'd say, but you always looked fine. You were never really overweight. And I said, well, you must never, ever judge a book by its cover. Because just because somebody appears to be of a normal weight or is slim, so shall we say, doesn't mean that there isn't some kind of disordered eating pattern going on. And in fact, it's not actually helpful to be complimenting somebody who has lost weight, I don't think, or who has managed to go through a kind of a body transformation unless you absolutely know the context, because you can be fueling that disordered eating and that idea that my external validation comes from what I weigh and comes from my body shape without understanding the consequence of that. You could be fueling it. And of course that was happening. I mean, I also grew up in a time when there was no health at every size. There was a lot less presentation of lots of different body types on the television. There were things like Miss World beauty pageants, and there was a lot of what we know now as sort of un-PC comments about that women needed to be slim. There were no older women on the television. All of that kind of thing, which thankfully society had changed, but there was a huge amount of pressure and this idea that your value, particularly as a woman, I think, was to look slim and to be slim. And so that fuels the dieting and that fuels the binging, and it just carries on. But I think that the other thing that people are quite surprised about, but this is the same for lots of people who have an eating disorder or disordered eating. You don't have to have a fully blown recognized eating disorder. There's all sorts of grey in between. The fact is that there are a lot of people, and we probably go into this in a bit more detail, but a lot of people out there who do not have what we would call a normal or an uninterrupted and ordered relationship with food. But it's not necessarily dominating your life all the time. I mean, as you've heard, I've had different careers. I've got 2 children. I have managed things in my life, so it hasn't been debilitating. But what it has been is a constant narrative. It has sapped energy, sapped time, sapped confidence. And for sure, there are a few days where I didn't go into work because I couldn't move, because I had eaten so much food the evening before that I had not really rested and had not slept at all because my body was so busy trying to digest all this food. that I would wake up in the morning absolutely exhausted with the most incredible hangover, because of all the energy and all the effort that body's has had to put into digesting this food. And fully blown binge eating disorder means consuming incredible volumes of food, and you only really stop when you feel really ill, or if you are also bulimic, you purge so you don't keep it in you, or the food runs out. And it's anybody that hasn't experienced it, I think it's a difficult thing to understand, because you think, well, how do you just keep, why don't you just stop? But it's almost like when you're in the thick of it, it's like you're watching yourself reach for the next piece of food, and the eating disorder is its own entity, and it's talking to you all the time, and it's driving the behavior, and it's almost like the conscious mind is waving a white flag. I'm going, okay, all right, off you go, just do it. I haven't got the energy to fight. This is what we're doing. And when you are locked in it, it is at that moment providing you something positive, which is also, I think, difficult to understand. In that moment, it is providing you with whatever it might be, the distraction, the comfort, the soothing, the feeling of eating because you've been on a 800 calorie diet for the last 2 weeks, and it's not until then later that you get the physical symptoms, and you get one hell of a beating up, but it sort of has to follow its little time period at that moment until it burns itself out. And then you have a period of control, and then you might even have a period of perhaps normality, fairly normal, and then something will kick it off, and then it just, starts again. And then I got to the point where, I mean, it did actually calm down. So I met my husband when I was in my 40s, and that was quite a turning point. So it did calm down in terms of the severity of it, but I was still very body conscious and was still dieting, still, using apps and counting and going to the gym like a mad thing. And then I think I got to 56, and I just stood back and I said, hang on a minute. Having over periods of my life said, it's okay, I can manage it, I know what this is, it's fine. I don't put on that much weight because, of course, I was balancing it with the restriction. So overall, calorie wise, food intake wise, I barely fluctuated a stone, 14 pounds. Okay, so that's not a lot, maybe a stone and a half, maybe 21 pounds. But I kind of said, you have to try and get to the bottom of this, because otherwise, do you actually want to look back on your deathbed and not have fixed it, and just have accepted it as part of your relationship with food and part of your makeup? And I thought, you're an intelligent woman. You help other people get to places that are more helpful for them, albeit in a different environment. You've got skills. You can do some study. So therefore, you can do it for yourself. And I read loads of stuff, and I was helped by the fact that there was a lot of non-diet culture material out there, and there was the whole intuitive eating movement, and there were alternatives. And eating disorders, apart from anorexia, had barely been spoken about for the large part of my younger life. But then people started to talk about binging and binge eating, and so I kind of had realized that that was probably what I had. And I worked on myself for 6 months. And then in kind of summer of whenever it was, when I was 56, I can't work out the year that was. I was born in 62. Someone else can work that out. I kind of did it. And I changed my mindset and I became a different person around food. And I've not binged since.
Mm.
But I can overeat like normal people do. I can undereat like normal people do. Sometimes, if things are a bit tricky, I get a little voice that comes up from the depth of my subconscious mind that goes, "Well, you're having a really bad time. Let's go and raid the fridge." I go, "No, no, I don't think so." But anyway, and that's about as much as I get. And therefore, this thing happened, this accidental thing, if you like, that said, because I'm quite, and I like to share things and I like to talk a lot. You may have noticed, you probably haven't spoken for the last 15 minutes, but I'm not apologizing. No, oh, no way. I kind of, I just thought it's not enough for me to sit back and be happy in my own non-binge eating, non-restrictive world. I felt like I was so joyous about it. I felt like I really wanted to give it a go and see whether I had the necessary to be able to help other people get to the where I was earlier. So to not have 40 years. I mean, some people I work with are older than me and have had it for, longer. But there are a lot of people who are a lot younger. And when they get to the end of a program and they're no longer binging, purging, and they've got much more positive body image and they don't need to go on a diet and they've balanced out all that disordered roller coaster, and they're only 30. Okay. Great. You got 26 years on me. Amazing. It is the most, I mean, my stomach's turning over, right? Let's say it's the most incredible thing.
That was pretty powerful. First thought that came to mind was I th- there's I think there's something really beautiful in wanting to go serve and support those where you were. I think it's also a very intelligent thing to do because what I've learned is that when you go help people with the thing you just struggle with, it also holds you accountable to staying on track. And it teaches you a whole different lens. Wait, like this can be even simpler than I thought before. You learn in a whole different way. I had a coach once, she said, when you're ready to learn, start to teach. And boy, was she right. It's a whole different ball of wax. And you're like, I got to put this into my own words. I got to hold space in a different way. Another thought that I had, and I really love what you just brought up there, like the celebration of somebody who's now, say they're done with this problem or they've evolved through this problem. Because I don't think it's something that you said, like the severity of which you confront some of those things is different now. And there's a border. Like it's not to say that the emotional thing is not going to come up again, which I really hope people take that to heart. It's not about never having a problem. It's more about how do you handle it and how do you evolve through it with better ease, with more grace. And I think what was so cool about what you're saying there, I heard this statistic and I could be wrong, but even if it's remotely close to that, which I think it is pretty accurate, I think the average American woman goes on and off a diet 6 times a year. That's staggering. When you think of, and you just saved, let's just say you saved a woman 30 years of doing that to themselves. 30 times 6 is, I can't even do the math in my head, what, 180 failures? Get it that
Yeah.
180. And when people fail with their diets, as somebody could witness it, it's a pretty soul crushing. And it takes a long time to get back on the horse and be like, I'm going to start again. And that's very, as you mentioned, you used the word punitive before. I think that's a very accurate word. There's so much punishment and self loathing and so much pain. So I think it's really beautiful. You can help somebody with that, and help somebody who hears that can have a different scope. I've been actually using the 30-year window as a big thing of late. So ironic that it just came up there. So many people want to rush. I'm going to jump on the next crash diet and name your thing. As opposed to, and you and I are in spaces where we all know, like from a clinical standpoint, what is a real thing? It's going to be closer to a year, maybe. Let's call it 3 years if we're going to be really gradual, which is beautiful because it's a nice lifestyle transformation. I'm going to take, let's call it 3 years on the long end. Awesome. Now you're going to solve your problem in 3 years. Now you have 27 years to really enjoy your existence with a better self-image. In that perspective, that's actually a really short amount of time. Whereas we just talked about, you want to fail for 30 years, you want to fail 180 times on a pretty drastic scale that with many people, as you were describing, completely just destroys their internal self-image and self-worth. So what a beautiful gift that you're helping somebody so much earlier in the process. And I hope anybody hears that goes, maybe I should give myself permission to be more patient with myself. Go on a slower journey, gradually. And then
Yeah.
coming up that I was curious about, what was the mindset shift for you? You said you shifted your mindset. What was that? What really made the difference after all of that? And I thought it was interesting that when your husband came into the picture, I'm definitely curious about where some of that relationship helped change your perspective. And it said it wasn't right about it. I'm really curious about that.
Well, I think I felt very, very secure with him. And I think that probably made a difference. And I knew that he loved me unconditionally. And that also was quite a factor. I think looking back on it, I'm not sure that I realized it, at the time. But there's something I want to pick up on, and it is linked to the mindset shift. And that is that the whole dieting process is inevitably one of failure, because restrictive diets in the long term don't work, either because psychologically they're just too flipping hard to keep doing. Because, we are creatures that need a bit of comfort. We like a bit of soothing. We like a bit of Ben and Jerry's, and what's life without a bit of ice cream? And and so to actually deprive ourselves of these things is not sustainable in the long run. And so people learn to eat in a certain way on a diet, which can get them the results. They might well lose weight. Losing the weight's not the difficult bit, actually. It's then sustaining it and keeping it off. And there are various physiological reasons why that is very, very difficult. It has to do with metabolism, and that the body fundamentally wants to keep you alive. So if you put it into famine mode, it's not going to burn calories quicker. Hey, guess what? It's going to burn it slower. And you get to your weight, your target weight, and you go, hey, great. I'm going to have Ben and Jerry's every night like I used to. And your body doesn't know that that's what's happening, and it's still on the go slow. I mean, that's a very simplistic way of putting it. But the problem is that every time that happens, person who is on that diet feels like a failure themselves. They don't think it's the diet's fault. They don't think it's the eating behavior's fault. They think there's something wrong with me. Why can't I do this? What? I'm hopeless. I can't stick to a diet. I can't do this. I can't do that. And yes, you're absolutely right. Years and years of that. But of course, then it makes you want to try harder, and it makes you want to go on something even more extreme, and it sort of chips away at you, and it becomes defining. And it becomes so intrinsically linked to people's view of themselves that they can't separate the eating behavior, if it's an eating disorder, or the disordered eating, and or the diet failure, from the person that they are. And so they lose sight of that, and the whole eating thing just dominates their thinking all the time. I was talking to a client this morning who said, you have, or we together, because I always like to say it's we together. I'm just sowing seeds in your head. I'm not doing anything. You're doing all the work. She said, the chatter has stopped. And she had this constant chatter. Shouldn't I eat it? The whole kind of food thing. But to your point, what was the mindset shift? It was about this idea that you separate the eating behavior from yourself. So you see the eating behavior as something that you do, not something that you are. And I did some NLP work, neurolinguistic programming. I did a lot of visualization. I did a lot of work understanding the subconscious mind. And I was able to reframe it and to create some space between me, Laurie, and this thing that I did where food was concerned. And I was able to start an internal dialogue with my subconscious mind, to retrain it, to thank it for the suggestions that it was giving me, because it thinks it's helping. All this learned behavior, but I had to retrain it. It's like having a toddler, which you will find out in about 2 years' time. It's a bit like, you can't tell a child, don't do that. That's really stupid. You have to explain it. You have to firstly be compassionate. And that's a massive thing. Because somebody caught up in disordered eating and endless diet failure is not very kind to themselves. That was a really big thing. I had to forgive all the behavior, and I had to let it go and say, it doesn't matter that it's 40 years. The important thing, still quite emotional for me. The important thing is actually doing something about it now and looking to the rest of your life. And so by creating space, you can build up your own identity, and the eating behavior becomes a choice, and you create empowerment, and you change the balance of power. And that's what I did. So that gradually, I didn't need to binge anymore. I stopped buying clothes that were too small for me. And I took all the ones that were only skinny me size. I took them all to the charity shop, got rid of them all. And I started to feel much more comfortable in myself, and outwardly, and had this calm. So anyone who knows about binge eating, has witnessed it or experienced it, it's very fast. That's the difference between overeating very often, simplistically, and binge eating. It's quite frenzied. It barely gets chewed, it's really quite. And so by creating space, you also create to be able to say, well, okay, well, yeah, I'm getting this idea that I could go and do this thing, but actually really feeling that I really need to do it. So I'm just going to sit still for a while and see see if it goes away, and to allow it to just dissipate. And of course, then that takes the sting out of all the triggers and the messages, because they're not being acted on, they're not being embedded, they're not being reinforced. And gradually, over a period of weeks, months, you actually find that you don't need the behavior anymore. And it's quite an amazing feeling. It's really liberating. And anyone listening for whom any of what I'm saying resonates, it is possible. It's possible even after 40 years of all sorts of disordered eating behavior.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That was pretty moving. Got me in my field. Got me emotional there for a sec. Beautiful.
Mm.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, it was, there's so many things in what you just said that I'm like, hope people are hearing that. I really do. And ironically, what you said about your relationship with your husband, where he unconditionally loved you. I'm about to make a video on this because I think that ultimately what this all boils down to, I think we're all in pursuit of unconditional love. And sometimes seeing that and witnessing it in others, sharing that with us, and sometimes it's weird because we don't know how to receive it. But to experience that, to realize that somebody loves us, not because of what we do or how we look, it's because of the person that we are, who we are. And what you said in your mindset shift was like, I am not my failures. I'm not these behaviors. I am who I am, and these happen to be the things. Oh, I guess there's a separation. I can choose that. I can change behaviors. Oh, because it's not who I am. It's a thing I do. I can change that. That opens the door to hope. It opens the door to reclaiming control, as you said before. That's the empowerment, when you can separate the thing from yourself. And yeah, not easy, not simple. And you said it took some time, but you can just hear the difference in the way you described that, like that idea of the frenzied path.
Mm.
We think a lot about, again, maybe we'll listen to this. And I think there's a lot of analogs with like the frenzied and busyness, not just in the relationship to food, but an analog to life and the way business is, and just this hustle culture and this crash diet lifestyle that I think of. Then burnout culture and burnout cycles. It's the same thing. Like, I have to, I gotta. And everybody
Yeah.
fills up their life. They fill their plate too much with things that never even paused to think about that it was a self-soothing mechanism. As you were saying before, we used food as in your example, but people do it with work. People do it with drugs, alcohol, sex,
Shopping.
shopping. Yeah, it's a big one. That's an easy one, especially how easy it can be accessed nowadays. Name
Mm.
your vice, your numbing agents. I think what you shared there is what I think is so profound here, and I hope people can take from this, like, control, developing a better relationship with food. And not so much about just developing a better relationship. It's about developing a better relationship with yourself. Happens to be through the vehicle of food, which happens to also be really difficult because you gotta eat. You can't.
That's the problem. Yeah. Yeah. All that other stuff, you can stop. You can stop dead. You can go cold turkey. But we have to find a way to eat which is gently mindful, which is, there's a hell of a lot of gray out there. Forget perfectionism. There is no perfect. You have to let go of this idea of being on the wagon, off the wagon, black, white, good, bad, all of that. I mean, I mix it up for my clients completely, deliberately, so that they cannot look back on a day and say, was it good or bad? Because it's so mixed up. But that's a deliberate thing to do, so that it just becomes normal. We have an eye on nutrition, of course, because we want to nourish ourselves, because we're worth it, because we're worth more than this disordered eating, more than this pattern of eating, which we're using. We don't realize often we're using to punish ourselves. We're using to create achievement, to create goals, to create numbers, to be able to look at an app and say, wow, look, I only ate 900 calories today. It's all about, and it is tied up, isn't it, with, I think, this way of living where things have to be measured, where it is about achieving, and it's also about quick stuff. Whereas, in fact, we could go back 50, 60 years. There's this adage, everything in moderation. Nobody says that anymore. Well, that's not very cut and thrust, is it? No. But boy, it's absolutely an amazing way to live. Everything in moderation. Let's go back to some grey. Let's go back to just being a little bit more free and easy about it and get off the treadmill. Stop being a hamster on the wheel, because it is all tied up. And it's quite interesting that sometimes I have to do some work with people around their personality and what they need from life, around perfectionism, because when the eating behavior sometimes starts to settle down, they might say, I've started late night shopping. I've never done that before. What's going on? And so unless you look at someone holistically, to your point just now, something else, if they've got this kind of mad challenge with themselves, this competitive nature, say, that actually they need something to replace it and start providing something that perhaps, the dieting and because it's also connected. So we have to look at it holistically, to make sure that the whole person becomes happier in themselves and is liberated, perhaps in more ways than they realize. Relationships can change, jobs can change, how much money people need to live on can change, lots and lots of things. It's really very enlightening that very often the eating behavior is a symptom, not a cause. And that needs to be unearthed very often as well.
Hard to tell that to somebody.
Yeah.
Because
You kind of let them realize that that's the way. That's the way you and I do it. I know, you just have to sow some seeds and stand back, and lots of analogies going on here. Wait for the penny to drop. And we might just say, it's interesting. And then they go, what? Hey, I've just realized something. You go, right. Because we all know that if we can see something ourselves, it's much more powerful than somebody else telling us about it. And so that's our job, isn't it? I will say my work is to help somebody understand what's happening for them. Because once they understand, then they're on the road to finding a different way.
did I tell you I love you? You're fantastic.
Oh, well, thank you.
You've really highlighted something, and we talked a little bit about when I was on your show, but this it keeps resonating with me that we've gotten so aversely centered on our self-worth being attached to these external things, this external validation concept. We're essentially worshiping false idols of money and things and stuff and surface level relationships to just, I have the trophy of me, your thing, the trophy house, the trophy wife, the trophy job, the trophy this, the trophy body. And all of those things fade. But the true you is always there, regardless of the external. You said that you can change your job, you can change your relationship. You might find you don't need to spend as much money on things. I mean, we carry this bloat, whether it's existentially or spiritually or physically, to what? To feel like we are enough. But man, I can get real lonely being like carrying it's all like yes, and you said it before, it's like the weight loss is not the problem. The maintenance. Well, the other side of this, the maintenance of carrying all these burdens, of all these things that do not serve the relationship that we hope to actually have, that of unconditional love, to both receive and give unconditional love.
Mm.
Holy shit, this 800-pound gorilla of stuff to maintain every day that is not making you any happier.
That's it, isn't it? And because when you were on my podcast, you were making such amazing points, but one of them being that you have to decide what makes you happy. You know, you have, because quite a lot of people who are caught up in a weight cycle, dream body scenario, I think they actually need to stand back and say, is attaining this or maintaining, is it really making me happy? Do I really want to be counting my macros and micros every single day? Do I really, want to feel that unless I run every day, I'm going to put weight on? And I'm terrified of that. Therefore, I have to run, or I mustn't eat this or the other. Whereas in fact, maybe all they need to do is go up a dress size. I mean, seriously, they need to go up one, maybe two dress sizes, and that is the weight that their body wants to be. And therefore, they need to live into that. They need to embrace that and go, do you know what? I can eat normally, mindfully. I'm not talking about going crazy. I can eat mindfully. I can have some regular exercise that I enjoy, that I'm not doing because I'm terrified. And hey, I'm curvier than that. But I look at that photo of myself and I think that's where I wanted to be. And I look back on it and I think I was really miserable, trying to stay. Would it be in the States? I don't know, a size 4 something crazy, or even something that is a lot lower than one's natural body weight. That could be any size, and instead turn and say, right, this is how I want to live. I want to feel free around food. I want to feel free in my body. I don't want to have to worry about it all the time. I want to put my energy into other things, more interesting things. Maybe that might be people. Maybe that might be a bit of altruism. Maybe that might be your work, but in maybe a slightly calmer, kind of less materialistic way, and see how much happier you are. It's very interesting that quite often women particularly will come to me and they will have this arbitrary number that they want to get down to. And I say, well, I don't really talk about numbers. I talk about eating behavior. And if we can get that sorted out and you genuinely have weight to lose, it may start to fall off. It could take ages. I've got no idea. That's not where I focus my attention. Very often, having gone through a program and stabilizing all the dieting mentality and the disordered eating and allowing all foods, but in a mindful way, they get to a point where they actually don't care anywhere near as much as they did when they started about what size they are. It matters a lot less because we've settled down the the destructive messages, that were keeping them absolutely, fixed on this thing that was making them really, really unhappy. And off they go, and they're doing things that they haven't done for ages, like putting a swimsuit on and going wild swimming, you know, because it matters less. It matters less. It's in perspective.
What I think is powerful about what you're sharing there is, and you referenced it several times, the good or bad stuff, the dogmas, not seeing that each one of these paths, they're just tools. They're a framework, how you want to get there. What I really like about what you're saying is when you first address the relationship with the self and then some of the behaviors and the understanding around them. Ironically, if you do want to keep losing weight, it'd be actually a lot easier because the relationship and how you go about using the tools within the how, as opposed to trying to destroy yourself on the path to get to X for some arbitrary reason, which is not, if you really want to, awesome. And yes, there's healthy weight ranges for certain things from disease standpoints and all that. But the way you get there is very important because the shifts you'll make in your lifestyle, the way you support that change with your relationships, you'll know how to ask the right questions. They'll know how to check in on you. You'll know how to feel supported if it's important to you. That's going to be easier to maintain, but it's not the other way around. I think a lot of people are thinking, I'm going to be happy when.
Yeah. Oh, yes. How many times have we heard that? Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not going to say I'm any different. I've
Yep.
other
Me
times,
neither.
right? Takes one to know.
Yeah.
No.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, you very beautifully illuminated here is oh, you're not going to care as much about the number. Now you can use tools if it is macros, if it is numbers, if it is whatever the external thing is, that's nice, but you don't, it's not this neurotic behavior. It's not this neurotic thing that consumes all of your life and detracts you, with in many ways you can just describe it as an addiction, right? An addiction is something that negatively interferes with you living the rest of your life. This is now, oh, okay, I'm using the tool. It's fine. I'm still going to exercise. I'm still going to move. I'm going to feel good in my body. Well, go figure. If you're actually enjoying it, the basic mechanics of move more, eat less calories naturally will happen because you enjoy moving more. Maybe you start liking to go hiking or, as you said, go swimming more. Thing is, you just naturally are more at peace with your body. How you get there is going to be far more enjoyable. And because you enjoy it, you're going to stick around. And it's not going to be maintained. You're just going to be, and it will be. And it won't be a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it doesn't feel like a punishment.
At all. Not at all.
And that the focus is on health and on nourishing yourself and looking after yourself and doing it because you're worth it. Doing it because you deserve it, doing it because you deserve to be looked after. And that has nothing to, we don't earn that. That is not dependent on the job that you've got and and where you've got to in your life. You were born deserving that. Deserving to nourish yourself, deserving to look after yourself, and deserving not to beat yourself up. And it's something that I have to remind lots of people about. I have to try and encourage them to see that. And that can take some time because, as we mentioned earlier, this whole kind of failure thing. But yeah, so much of these things start with self and really taking a helicopter view of the setting that we live our lives and the values and the things that we think are important and the things that we think make us happy. And a disordered relationship with food is just one of a number of symptoms if that isn't right. Sometimes it's can be about childhood and upbringing and experiences and the role that food has played in our lives. And I very often look back at that as well, because that helps the understanding. People can see how they may have used food in their lives and how it's helped them when they've had a particular issue or something's been going on with them. But that has passed, and yet 15, 20, 30 years later, well, the mind hasn't really caught up, and it's still giving them that behavior, even though the issue and the setting and the need perhaps has changed. And so by understanding that previous relationship and letting it go and being really compassionate about it, that then helps us say, okay, so I don't really need that now. And if I feel that feeling, I could actually go and do this, or I could do this, or I could remind myself about this, about myself and my life. And I didn't have that back then, but now I do. And that again is helping me make a different decision about how I respond to that stimulus. It maybe doesn't have to be food, or doesn't have to be a diet, or doesn't have to be self recrimination.
My brain just jumping in 9 different directions thinking about all this stuff right now. It's well, and I like how you just said like the understanding your previous relationship opens all these other doors that and it led to what I think was a very profound theme that is, I think is underwriting a lot of everything we talked about is this permission, but leading into forgiveness. This forgiveness that allows you to let go and accept what was. This pervasive shame and guilt. Not that those aren't, I have learned, or I mean, helped me kind of adjust my perspective on it recently. And I was a recent guest. Like shame and guilt, they are useful. We wouldn't have experienced those emotions if they didn't serve a purpose. But it's about knowing how and when. And I think so many people have just been taught to use this as blanket things, blanket tactics to go about everything, not teaching us content, not teach. And that, but I don't think that was something that was well done. And we're learning a lot about how do you apply things with content? How do you create better understanding? How do you, inevitably, how do you create greater curiosity? Well, before you can even do that, there's got to be this forgiveness that you're alluding to, the permission to move forward and that create this better understanding that develops a better relationship. And of course, our childhood, being able to inform some of things, I think so powerful. And when I was thinking about that, you had mentioned you did a lot of performance, right? And I'm assuming what type of performance was it? Like acting, was it stage kind of stuff, dance? What was that?
Singing and acting. Yeah. Yeah.
We're quite the creative over here in marketing, so right? I didn't know that. Well, I think about kind of the historical cultures around that. I've worked with a lot of dancers. I've worked with a lot of people in that kind of space that's performing art. There is a very restrictive, very rigid, like you got to fit the mold of what is good and bad, right and wrong. I'm curious how did that kind of leading into something later on.
Well, I think that's particularly with dancers. I think in classical singing, so I did some musical theatre, but mostly singing is my first discipline, really. And I think in classical singing, there's a lot less of it. It doesn't really matter. And, some of the best opera singers are larger people. And because it's been about their voice. It hasn't been about how they look. It's actually not really relevant because it's about how they deliver that role vocally. So, and also my performance was always secondary to my other professional life. So I did some semi-pro stuff, but I was never really in a world where it was going to put undue pressure on me. I was a big fish in a small pond, which was quite comfortable. So it was either amateur or it was semi-pro stuff. So, you know, I escaped probably some of the pressures that I'm sure a lot of other young people who are trying to get jobs are subject to, because, you know, I did go to some pro auditions and you walk in and you do your stuff and you don't even finish. You know, next. And you and it's very difficult not to compare yourself to everyone else that's standing in the line and the person that's got the job. But thankfully, I didn't really have too much of that. No, I mean, I think that my eating behavior was fueled by a need to achieve. And I think that was I don't know whether that came about through upbringing or I don't know, but I always had it. I always thought that I needed to do better and needed to do more. And it was never quite good enough. And so I'd always be looking for the next thing and that I could be doing. And I'm sure that that's linked to it, but that might just be a personality thing. You know, it's not necessarily something that happened. It might just be part of my makeup and that's just how it manifested itself because I had this body image stuff and I started dieting and you know, so sometimes it is just about somebody's personality. If one has a perfectionist trait or one's quite competitive, you know, it can exacerbate something that's slightly lurking there. You know, so all of that's quite really, really interesting to try and uncover with someone. And that's why I really like one-to-one work, which is what I do mostly. I do the occasional sort of group stuff, but really I like one-to-one because you can really get under the skin of somebody. And they might work with me for anything from 2 months to, you know, a year on and off. And, you know, but then ultimately they fly because that's what it's about. It's about them not needing me anymore. It's about them having the confidence and the wherewithal and the tools and the understanding, come back to that big capital letter word, that even if times are difficult and the little triggers come back, that they've got everything that they need to be able to deal with it at that moment and make the choice and just carry on. You know, that's what I like people to leave with the most amazing toolbox and a manual that is written bespoke for them and their personality and how they want to live their life around food.
I mentioned this on another episode, but I believe one of my jobs in this life is to, like, the way is to like help people sharpen their BS detector. And I want them to know how you just respond is perfect for somebody who's looking for somebody who knows what they're talking about. Because you just said, I want to let them fly. There's a lot of people who don't set up their business or their organization with that. And as somebody who's gone up a call, they go like, this is I'm one and the only and the only everything. What I loved about what you were saying there was about the empowerment and to set them free. Because to then step in and be the next thing, it's like almost like you would have replaced food with you as the crutch.
Mm.
Thought that was really beautiful for people to hear. Oh, wait, whether it's you, myself, anybody else, like somebody who thinks about more or less putting yourself out of a job, which means you're also operating from a place of abundance, not of scarcity. Thought that was really important for people to hear that. I've mentioned it once before on another one because somebody does something similar. I already admired you. Just like keep adding things to the list of why I just appreciate you and I'm glad to have you in my life. That was just so
So
exciting.
kind.
You
Thank you.
need to hear these things. You need to know that you're awesome. Or be reminded that you're awesome. I think you know you're awesome, but I'm going to make sure you know. me. You're not going to make sure. I want to make sure you don't leave here not knowing that you're
Okay.
my
All
eyes.
right. Thank you.
Let's move to some fun questions. You've already kind of answered the first one, but I'm curious a little more about the second
Right.
phase of it.
Okay.
So, question number one:
Yeah.
what sports or creative activities did you play when you were younger? But part two of that question B is, how did you play them? Like, what was your style? What was your, how did you go about it?
Well, I started when I was 11 in a little village theatre group. And then I did a bit of school. And then I had voice training. And I still have singing lessons. And I did a bit of band stuff and stuff in a pub in a duo. And then I had a bit more training. I did a bit of musical theatre. And then in my 40s, I had like proper classical training and realized that I had this operatic soprano voice, which is now I use to do charity concerts and sing at things to try and raise money for things locally. Just tiny, tiny things, little things, little churches. No great big deal at all. But I absolutely love to just keep singing.
All right. So this is going to be a fun observation around this. So reason why I asked this question, I studied kinesiology in university, college, whatever you call it. And one of the classes I took was on play and how we play. Very important in it's a great indicator of how we do many other things. It's because of how do we creatively solve problems? How do we go about organizing ourselves? But I thought that was really interesting how you communicated, especially in parallel with your growing relationship with food and your different relationship. It has evolved. It's that with always with an undertone of how are you giving at the end? How do I give back? That you just talked about. I was churches, I do these concerts, I do things along the benefit. That was really interesting to hear how it matured and evolved, and you kept trying and you kept going and you kept playing and kept doing. Similar
Mhm.
to how you're doing your quote unquote profession, even though you talked about it as a vocation. I thought that was
Mhm.
the undertone to that is you never stopped playing, which I thought was really beautiful. That was a very cool response. That's a very unique response to that question. I haven't gotten something like that right now. And that's how I viewed that. That was cool.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, that's
You,
just how it is. So
you
did
just keep being cool. You just keep being cool today. I'm loving this. This is great.
um,
Number two, well, you're stranded on a desert island, and you can bring one movie and one TV show with you. So what's your desert island movie and show and why?
oh wow. Gosh, the movie. It would have to be something that was about a human journey, I think, and maybe something that was a bit of a laugh. Or it would be something like, can I give kind of two? It might be something like Notting Hill, because there's so much in it, and I love all the actors, and it's so romantic, and it's just lovely, and it's funny. Something, so I think probably something like that, because I would never get tired of that amazing Richard Curtis script because it's so fantastic. TV program. I mean, I like quite kind of gritty stuff. I like power. Quite interesting, actually. I like, power play stuff. So things like Succession, I absolutely loved. Um, so I like that. I like things. I like murder stuff, like the Scandi stuff. I like the killing. You know.
Well, hello, other side of what? This is the
I
shadow
know.
coming out here.
I know. I know. So yeah, I like really really detailed plots, really complicated stories, you know. But then I like Jane Austen as well. So honestly, my taste is extremely eclectic. So let's go with Notting Hill and Succession because I could watch that over and over again.
The funnest I used to my mother and I we kind of butted heads a lot when I was younger. And but there was a period where we would watch these Julia Roberts movies together, and Notting Hill is on the list of the movies that I think is hilarious, absolutely hilarious. Uh,
It's so good.
there
Yeah.
was a big guy who walks out one time just in his underwear, and I can't remember what is the character's name. I was dying. It just his character in general was a riot. Um,
Well, the actor is Rhys Ifans. He's a Welsh actor, and I can't remember his name in the film either. But yeah, he is just hilarious.
bullying. So that was also a little nurturing of the soul right there.
Oh, nice.
What I liked about your response, I think that media, movies, the entertainment we engage in tells us a lot about how we think about things as well. So
Mm,
an evolution of the story, go figure
mm,
what you're interested in work, but also when you talk, yeah, maybe a little gritty, a little dark, but like the intricacies of things. And you talked about it. Like I like the complicated, like
mhm,
similar when you start to unpack somebody's relationship
mm.
with food,
Exactly. Yeah.
not simple.
Try to work it out, to have to work it out and see the clues and go, oh, okay. So let's see if we can work around that. Let's see if that unlocks something else. Oh, yes. Very good connection. You see, I had never made that. Very astute.
But I am a bit of a crazy person too, so it's all good. That I
As I
see.
said earlier,
I
takes one to know one.
I think it's- I can't get into like the murder mysteries, all those things. Those ones kind of like the dark ones. Those that are horror films. That's not a thing for me. Especially like scary movies. Not like a big win.
No,
Those
no,
don't.
no. But, but those ones where they're really trying to unravel a very intricate plot and story,
Yeah.
then those are great. No, I mean horror films. I mean, I can watch them, but wouldn't be on my top 10.
Right. Final question. I think you're gonna like this one.
Okay.
What is your deathbed meal, and who are you sharing it with, and why?
Oh, well, uh, my absolute favorite dish is chicken pad thai because there's something about and I've tried to recreate it at home. Can't do it. There's something about that flavor and the crispy noodles and then the egg noodles in it and with added vegetables, probably. Who? Oh, am I only allowed one person?
You can say as many as you'd like.
Well, it would be as many families and friends as I could fit into the room. Would be all the people that I love that have brought me something through my life. All of those together. All, on the bed, falling off the bed, sitting on the floor, sitting on the headboard, all eating chicken pad thai with a Thai beer, maybe, if that's allowed.
All allowed. There's no good or bad. It's your meal. That's your choice.
Absolutely. Yeah, that'd be great.
Well, I love your response because number one, I believe that world peace is going to be solved one family dinner at a time. And that was really beautiful to say. And you say you just said everybody who's ever taught me a lesson or love, like shown me love or given me that kind of love along the journey. I think that's really beautiful. But I know I shared with you a little bit on your show about that speech I wrote. The window in the mirror, and then ultimately,
Mm.
and on your deathbed, the window in the mirror is about that. Who's there? Who's showing you about yourself? Like,
Mm.
so beautiful. I said, like, these are all the people. These are all the lessons, and this is the accumulation of all that love, just looking right back at me.
Yeah, because it's about people. It's about how you touch people. It's not about anything else. I don't want to eat my pad thai with my car in the bedroom. or my house or my pay packet. I mean, no, no, it's about the human connection, because that is absolutely irreplaceable. That's why, this work and trying to elicit some kind of positive change for people is so incredibly rewarding. And I don't want to sound cheesy, but I really do feel in a way, I feel quite privileged. And whilst I would have liked to have started this 20 years before now, it doesn't matter. The fact is that I went on this process of healing myself, but it almost feels like it wasn't about me. It feels like it was that I had to do it in order that I could do this. I've never, apart from perhaps when I'm on stage where I do feel very, very in the zone, I've never professionally, I think, felt more in the zone than when I'm doing this work. And I think there's a really big reason for that, because it's right in here, and I just get it because I know what it feels like, and the training and stuff that I had helped give me other tools. But I just think it's really important I carry on doing it right up until I'm eating chicken pad thai in bed.
Wow. This has been, you like got me in my heart and my feels today.
No,
I love it.
me too, a bit.
What else is life but then to be able to share these kind of things, meaningful conversations.
Yeah.
I don't understand people who just keep it surface. I don't get it. I don't get it. There's such a world and a connection once we decide to be real with each other and to share these stories. Like what? I mean, I think there's so many powerful things that you shared today, just both in your development of your relationship with self, but also things that people can learn. Oh wow, this is important stuff. And by the way, let's always remember at the end of our life, what are we going to care about? The relationships and the people that share. Notice nothing you said there was about the number on the scale, or you said the car or the thing. Like, none of that's going to matter. These are the things that we need to be reminding each other of, that's what's important. And I think there's something powerful in that. So yeah, wow. Mhm.
Well, I would like to thank you for inviting me on and giving me so much time and space to talk about this. And I hope that it's helpful for the people listening, So you're very, very generous the way you run this podcast and conversation. And, I appreciate that very much. So thank you.
Well, you're very welcome. It's been my pleasure to be able to hold space for that. And I know definitely people have taken some value from this for sure. And I have. And I can't wait to listen back to this while I'm editing it and be like, oh yeah, that hits. That's really good.
Mm.
And if somebody is listening and they're like, hey, I need more of her and her beautiful little accent and her wonderful smile and beautiful energy, what would be the best way for somebody to connect with you?
So the best way is to book to have an online chat with me, which is very relaxed, and just so that we can explore where it is that you are and what you want to achieve, because I always want to make sure that I'm the right person to help you. And you can do that by going onto my website, and you just click in for something that I call a mindful moment. And we share that time together so that I can understand a bit more about you and you can understand a bit more about me. And then we can see how best to help you understand what's going on and to move forward.
Well, I'll make sure that in the show notes, everybody, all the contact information to be able to go book that is there and available. And I hope you go do that ASAP because we haven't learned here, it's probably better to solve this problem now than to wait a longer period of time, because that's not going to be helping anybody. Lori, my dear, what are your final words of wisdom you'd like to share with the audience today?
My words are a few things. It's never too late, is one. The other thing is to take a step back and ask whether you are normalizing something in your relationship with food and yourself and exercise that really, and are you making it seem ordered because it's easier when in fact it's disordered, and that you can do something about it. Absolutely, you can. And it's all in with you. You just need somebody to help you see it.
We got a mic drop moment to just close this thing out. That was beautiful, as I should expect by this point. It always just flows and it's wonderful. Well, thank you, my dear, so much for sharing your thoughts and your energy and your wisdom with us today. Everybody, make sure you go check out the show notes, connect with Lori. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us today. And until next time, I remind you to love everybody.